Brilliant. Right, a very warm welcome to everybody to probably what's more like the first in the series of the project showcases. We've run a few, but we're really keen that we do a lot more of these at a regular cadence. The idea is to run the showcases every Friday at lunchtime and really ask, fantastic volunteers like AJ to come and talk about their experience working with the various charities. Thank you so much for offering to volunteer and also working with the Govan Community Project. And it's fantastic that we have Tracy here as well. So what's nice is we can bring the voice of the charity to these sessions as well. AJ, I see you've prepared a fantastic presentation, so thank you very much. But if you want to ask questions, throw it out to the audience, please do. But really, from me, I'd like to say thank you very much on behalf of the whole of the STA, in fact, because I think you were probably one of the earliest volunteers I met as well. So there was a lot of, go and ask AJ right in the early days. So thank you for everything you've done. This is just one bit of the work you did. So thank you.
Sure. No, absolutely happy to do it. Should I just start?
Yes, yeah.
Slides? Yeah.
Over to you.
Hi everyone. So I'm AJ. So I started working with the STA pretty much as soon as the idea, which was someone else's, of course, but I mean I thought it was brilliant and I joined up, and I've had a really good time meeting some really great people. So today I'll just take you through what we did with the Govan Community Project, and so I will get started. So it's a little bit of background on the charity. So the Govan Community Project is a charity that's based in Glasgow, and they work with asylum seekers. And usually what happens is that asylum seekers utilize public sources of Wi-Fi, such as the charity's office, the libraries, the community centers, and there's public transport as well to access support. And most of the support that is currently available is on digital platforms. And so therefore this public source of Wi-Fi is very, very crucial in sort of accessing that support. Now, the reality is that the individuals in these circumstances live in extreme levels of poverty, and often they're living on under £5 a day, which is the amount of financial support that they get. So you can imagine that there is very little that they have in terms of resources to purchase smartphones or data allowances or anything like that. And therefore there is this access to Wi-Fi that is absolutely crucial to them, and they are dependent on sources outside of their home to sort of have that access to Wi-Fi. And so all of this was happening. I think it was already something that was being managed at the seams, but then COVID hit, and sort of I think that really put a lot of pressure on many individuals in this space. So what happened was that first of all, lockdown measures came in, and that restricted access to public spaces where Wi-Fi was available for free. And then asylum seekers couldn't sort of, so the critical services that they accessed in person started to move online because of COVID-19 restrictions as well. And so, and most importantly, there's up-to-date information that they have to know about various things. Tracy can give in more detail, but all of that was now available online. So the importance of being able to get online multiplied a lot after COVID hit. The other aspect is the social aspect. So apart from the economic aspect, there is this social support that people have amongst each other in this community, and the restrictions sort of made it impossible for people in this community to stay connected with each other. And therefore what can happen is, and we have seen this ourselves over the last couple of years, that it leads to social isolation, which can have detrimental impact on mental health and other things. There is also the element of digital literacy. So what the Govan project was also doing was, where it was needed, they would also sort of upskill the people, and they would make them digitally digitally literate, being able to use technology, being able to use devices for their benefit in a better way so that they can access the support on digital platforms. And now without that support from the government, from the charity, having to learn these platforms themselves, again, made it a challenge to access the support that was needed by them. So the problem was identified. The problem was identified by the charity that there was an aspect of digital poverty. There was, and this needed to be addressed. And if this could be addressed, then they could continue to provide the services and the support that they were providing to the community. So obviously what charity did was so what Tracy did was they decided that this was the way to go, and they went ahead and they bought devices, right? So the answer was that they buy devices and they lend it to the people for them to use. So, and they did a brilliant job of going out quickly raising funds, and they bought a good number of smartphones and tablets. And in my experience, I mean, that is usually the most difficult step, you know, being able to identify the problem, then being able to raise a requisite amount of funds, and being able to then go and take the first step towards solving the problem, which is buying the infrastructure. And I mean, they had already done it. The hard work was done, to be honest. Now, the idea was that these devices would be lent with data plans preloaded onto them to asylum seekers, and therefore the asylum seekers would be able to access digital services and information on them. Now, however, am I still audible and visible? Yes. Okay. However, what needed to happen was that these devices needed to be managed centrally by the charity. So therefore, there had to be some semblance of control. If these devices had been lent out, the charity had to have visibility on where these devices were, how they could control these devices, and if they needed to push certain information onto these devices on behalf of the people who were using it, they could do that as well. So what the charity was looking to do, their requirement was to set up and understand the G Suite mobile device management module. So Google provides for businesses, basically, they provide a set of tools. It's called G Suite, and those tools include Gmail, I mean, email for business, basically, their version of Gmail, and then Drive, where you can store files and other things. And as a part of that, they provide a mobile device management policy, which basically allows the administrator of the company to manage the policy, the device policy on the company phones. Now, Tracy had already signed up to G Suite. They already were using G Suite, and they had decided, now we had to sort of implement a mobile device management policy, and there were two clear goals to this. One was keeping track of company-owned devices, right? So who had the device, who was using it, and if there were people who were using the phone for their personal work as well. So therefore, there had to be a separate demarcation of what was official and what was personal. And secondly, there would have to be a certain semblance of control that the charity has over the device. For example, for the if it was the charity's device and they needed to sort of remotely wipe out the data so that the device could be given to someone else, they could do that remotely. If the device was lost or stolen, then they had to be able to have the power to withdraw the services from the device so the device becomes unusable and other things. So there was this semblance of control remotely that the charity needed to administer over the devices.
Nice. I didn't know it could do that, AJ. Brilliant.
Quite a useful policy. So, so this is just putting all of them in one place. So the goals of the MDM policy was keep a track of devices and offer end user support, use this policy to manage all charity owned staff devices, use this policy for staff who are using their personal devices for charity work. So for that, you can do is create a separate work profile on the device where everything related to work is separate out, is managed there. It is completely separate from everything else on your device, and that work profile is controlled entirely by the administrator. Now, I mean, the biggest shortfall that charities face, apart from funds, is time. There is very little time that people have, and therefore what needed also to be done was that there had to be a setup that you could do remotely as much as possible without asking volunteers to spend too much time themselves setting things up or wasting time talking to people and trying to fix things. And the last part was, it goes back to the point we talked about digital literacy, where the charity wanted to sort of push downloads of useful apps onto the devices. So if they think that they would benefit from a Zoom installation, they could push the Zoom installation onto the devices, and then they could sort of so that the people who were using the devices could straight away start using Zoom, and they could therefore push useful applications onto the devices from the administrator side without having to teach the person to go to the app store or try to find it and try to download it themselves. They could do it from their side. So why me? So this is going to be very short. So I run my own firm. So I've basically used G Suite for myself and for my employees. I manage it completely myself. And if I can do that, that means that it is very simple to use, because that takes I don't have the bandwidth to have a very complicated policy. So it has to be very quick and very focused. And similarly, my company also has users which use their own devices for company work. So we sort of manage the policy in a way where we are able to demarcate what is there on the personal side and what is there for the work side on their phones. We are quite integrated into the Google ecosystem. We use Drive, Meet, we use quite a lot of Google solutions. So, I mean, I could understand the problem and I could see how I could sort of help Tracy solve it very quickly. This is the last slide. So, and then we'll just open it to questions. So what we did was, what we wanted to do, we wanted to link every device to a unique Govan Community Project email address, which we've done. We wanted to be able to, the admin to be able to delete remotely. If a certain email address needed to be deleted, they should be able to remotely wipe out all of the work-related data. So that feature is available. They can do that. The admin can remotely wipe out all work-related data. And then afterwards, the user is also assured that the admin cannot access the device anymore. So once they have deleted the work profile, the admin's access to the device stops completely. The admin should be able to install apps onto the user's phones and limit access of the users to these apps, and those apps will also be restricted access by basis the permission. So if there's an administrator, then they have more access. The user, this is a very important part, the user should not be able to delete their account on G Suite without the admin's permission, because if they're able to do that, then they've basically they've basically taken the control away from the admin. So they should not be able to do that without the admin's permission. And finally, the Board of Trustees of the GCP uses their own devices for email, and therefore on their phones, the work profile is kept separate from the personal profile, and the work profile is again controlled by the administrator of the GCP within the device policy that is set. So that's what we did with the GCP. In the larger scheme of things, or what GCP does, I only did a very small contribution. I think Tracy can talk more about what the GCP does, maybe.
Oh, thank you, AJ. That was really, really insightful and a really good start and context around sort of, the charity at the beginning when you started as well. So thank you for that. Tracy, it's lovely to see you here, and magic that we managed to match you up with AJ. What, how's it for you?
It was a great experience, and we were so grateful. We've actually found even since then, there is a very limited amount of people in the IT field who actually use or understand G Suite, because most people are Microsoft users. So we were really, really lucky to find AJ. So yeah, as AJ said at the beginning, before the pandemic, all of our services were face-to-face, office-based, informal drop-in. The organisation maybe had 3 mobile phones, that we used for WhatsApp for clients, and the 2 managers had one, and that was it. And then pandemic hit, everybody had to have these phones. We didn't have enough laptops at that point for everybody to homework, so people were using their own devices, etc., for a long time. And very quickly, the level of digital exclusion that our clients were experiencing became very apparent. So our immediate COVID response was, right, other than food, how do we address this? So we were fortunate to get some funding for a small amount of devices to begin with, which we've managed to build on with other funding and through some donations through business in the community as well. So, and other schemes that have been going on in the background, like the Glasgow Council Digital Inclusion Fund, etc. So, but we made a decision at the beginning, if we gifted the devices, we could only help a limited number of people, because in the beginning, we had very few phones. And people in the process, may move on, they may be moved to another area, they may obtain their leave to remain in their refugee status and then be in a better financial position to get their own phone with their own dedicated number, and that frees up the device for somebody else if we have it on a loan basis. But it was important that we were able to control these in some way, to be able to recall them or block them if we weren't getting them back. So obviously our insurance company were very sceptical about us lending things out. So we were like, right, how can we do this? And we'd spoken to a couple of the big phone companies who were all recommending all these expensive mobile device management plans. Our technical knowledge of G Suite at that point was pretty much, we used it for email and we used our Google Drives to share documents, and that was it. We had no idea about all the other admin capabilities within that system, had no idea there was a mobile device management system sitting within there already. And we had been looking at things that we were going to have to find money to pay for. So AJ's knowledge on that and how to set it up filled a huge skills gap and knowledge gap within the organisation, and also meant the money we would have spent on a device management plan enabled us to buy more devices, which meant we were able to help more people in the end. So the scheme's been running since early 2020 in the lockdown now. I think now we have about over 60 devices out on loan to people. We've supported over 150 asylum seekers with digital inclusion throughout the period. The project has now developed that we got a little bit more funding so we could train some of our clients as digital champions, speaking community languages, to take away the need for interpreters when we're explaining how to use Zoom or how to log into the phone. So the project's going to grow from there, but it would never have got started at all at the scale it's at if we hadn't had the support from AG and STA. So thank you so much.
Oh, fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant to hear. And I have to stick my hand up. I had no idea G Suite did that as well. So that was a complete learning for me as well. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, you're on mute, Alistair, if you
Yeah, sorry about that. Me always ready with a question. Interested, Tracy, AG mentioned that the Board of Trustees had also been supported using this approach. Do you provide them with GCP email addresses for use with the charity?
We do, yes, and that's been probably our biggest advantage over Microsoft with G Suite is as a charity, we don't get charged for it, and we have unlimited email addresses. Microsoft to give you 10 free licenses for users, and then you have to pay for everyone on top of that, which means we can give any volunteers who would ever need client phone numbers or addresses have a GCP email address, so we control that information, and our board members the same. All of our paperwork goes to, so if somebody leaves, we can immediately restrict their access to that information, because there had been issues with that in the past when board members moved on and maybe they had information stuck on their own personal Dropbox or something like that, and we couldn't access it. So yeah, it's been great, and it means, as I said, for data protection, all of our volunteers, if they want them, can have GCP email addresses as well.
Great.
Yeah, brilliant. You never know, we might be knocking on your door. We've started to put together training materials around Zoom, Teams, and G Suite actually. But the language twist would be phenomenal, actually, Tracy, because there are a number of refugee charities that we've been working with, and definitely there are a few languages that a couple of them were struggling to cover. So there might be some nice shared wins there, as it were.
Well, we do have a social enterprise that's an interpreting service, so
okay.
So we have access to lots of languages.
Excellent.
In the area of refugees and asylum seekers, is there a lot of interaction between different organisations that work to support them? So, for example, we've done some work with an organisation called PKAVS, which is Perth and Kinross, the TSI up there. I don't know if you have any connection with them or anybody else that also works with refugees, because again, I'm sure based on your experience, there's things that they could benefit from if they haven't already got them.
Yeah, definitely. I actually had contact with them before the lockdown a little bit, just discussing what they could do to make the Perth community more welcoming. And Perth is now in a situation. What's happened in the last kind of few months is, because there's been, Northern Ireland has had a 300% increase in the amount of people claiming asylum and not able to cope. So the rest of the UK local authorities have had to commit to helping. So we're now in a situation where Glasgow had been the only city in Scotland who supported asylum seekers and have been doing it for 20 years. Now there are people fanned out to hotels in areas who have maybe supported refugees through settlement schemes, but never supported people through the asylum process, which is so much more challenging and hostile. And Perth is one of those areas. So, but we have a coalition of organisations in Glasgow called the Roof Coalition, who started up as local asylum sector agencies to oppose the lock change evictions that the accommodation providers were putting in place. And we're now called the Roof Coalition, and we've been working with all of the agencies in these new areas to see where we can support and help strengthen the voice for when Home Office and the accommodation providers aren't doing what they should.
Okay.
That's really useful. We might be back to ask you some more questions around that, Tracy. Brilliant. Any other questions from anybody? John? Yeah.
That was really interesting and fascinating to hear the use of G Suite in that way. Such a really good approach. I was wondering, particularly the client group you're working with, if they had any concerns around privacy and confidentiality, because obviously a managed device is probably more secure than something somebody might have sourced themselves. But I wonder if somebody come from a background in a country where this kind of government control or monitoring of devices, I wonder what their kind of feeling might be about, well, this is a device that has a management agent on it, and whether that led to any interesting conversations.
So I think people have been okay with it because of the level of trust they have in the organisation. I think if it was coming from MEARS or the Home Office as an offer, there would have been that level of concern about that. And there is definitely, I've just got notes yesterday from a session that was on concerns about misuse of data to monitor people more than they have. They're starting to use Like, for example, they're starting to use GPS tags for people who had been in immigration detention, whereas it used to be a tag that just said when they went back to the house. Now it's tracking them everywhere they go 24/7. So it's and how the Home Office are using that data, etc. So people are concerned about how some agencies use their data, and there is a whole campaign and research project around that. But for ourselves, I think because we are not a statutory agency, and we have a good standing in the asylum community, and there's really strong word of mouth and community connections within the asylum community in Glasgow. Most of our referrals come from word of mouth to other people who've used the service. So we do have that kind of level of trust, that I think there is that trust there that we won't misuse their information.
Good question, John. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
With obviously you're interacting with the clients, backwards and forwards over these mobile devices. Have you seen much peer interaction between them? So I know we've spoken to organisations that have used Google Hangouts as a way of enabling them to communicate amongst each other more easily as well. And obviously you can use WhatsApp and that kind of thing, but just wondering what you do about that.
Yeah, so WhatsApp is the main way that we communicate with our clients over the phones, because it's easier for them to translate into their own languages if they need to as well. So we've arranged services that people access. So WhatsApp will be used for our caseworkers to message people, to get electronic signatures on documents, etc. But we also run community groups. So we have a men's group, a women's group, a homework club group, we have a film project, and every group has its own WhatsApp group, and they will interact with each other on a regular basis. The challenge that comes with that is staffing or volunteer resource to moderate it, because it comes with the same challenges of any chat facility, that if it's not moderated, then things can go up. Our one criticism of WhatsApp, it has been a lifesaver throughout the lockdown for people, but the fact that you can't withhold your number from other people in a WhatsApp group is the one kind of main safeguarding issue we would say we've had with it. And but yeah, they do interact with each other and have conversations out with the group sessions and share resources. Somebody finds out about a new benefit that the government's brought out that people with no recourse to public funds are able to access. People share it, they will ask, how do I get this? We've heard there's this new grant, how do we get it? How do we get the new bus travel pass for our children and that kind of stuff? So we do use WhatsApp for that all the time.
Okay.
Any other questions? No, I'll take silent. I could keep talking about all sorts of other stuff, Tracy, but I'm conscious this is a showcase of that. So yeah, I mean, if you like, I'm sure Alistair and I will be in touch about a whole range of different things. Yeah, because we're working with in a few different fronts, geographically, Glasgow-wise, but also with refugee charities. There's been a few discussions. So, really great to see the work you've done, AJ. And I think the magic touch with this stuff is when you can see it started, you guys using G Suite as well. So, you've not gone out to procure something different, which also adds the whole complexity of managing many vendors. So, there'll be a whole load of unseen costs you've saved yourself as well. It's amazing how much tech does more than people realize. So it's really nice when you see it.
And I was actually surprised that we recently put out to tender our kind of IT support contract, and the amount of companies who came back and said, we can't offer you a support contract if you don't move to Microsoft. I was like, can't afford to move to Microsoft. We have 20 odd staff, 30 to 40 volunteers and our board, and we've got an email address for every single one of these devices. So we couldn't do it. But I was actually surprised at the amount of IT companies who say, oh, we don't work with that. So, but for charities in particular, the fact that you can get all those email addresses and that whole package for no cost is amazing.
Yeah, it we use it, so but brilliant. So thank you so much for your time and joining us. AJ, thank you for putting together the really comprehensive slides and everything as well. It's really appreciated, and I know I had a number of people, like I said, that were keen to see this, so they'll be delighted. We'll load it on Vimeo so it's available for people to watch and catch up. But a sincere thanks from us, and Tracy. Hopefully, we'll meet you guys again in the future. Who knows what?
Thanks very much for all your support. I don't know how successful we would have been without the input, or how much extra money it would have cost us. So thanks so much, AJ.
No, absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, well done. Thank you.
Thank you. It was really interesting.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks. Right. Have a lovely
Thanks,
weekend,
everybody.
everybody.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye, folks.
Stop recording.